G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. Welcome to the 7th of December 2020. The 79th anniversary of the pearling of the harbour. The Sunday morning which Roosevelt said will go down in history as a day of infamy. When the USA found itself attacked by surprise, apparently due to delays in the decoding of a diplomatic cable from Tokyo to Washington, and further delays in traffic getting to the post office, which meant that the declaration of war, which should have arrived 3 to 6 hours before the first bombs landed on Pearl Harbour, didn't turn up for 3 or 5 hours after the first bombs. So America was surprised, America was attacked. That was on the 7th of December. On the 11th of December, Adolf Hitler declared war on the US. Some people say that he had good reasons to do so. Other people say that he was tricked by British secret intelligence spy versus spy operations involving Germany's intelligence network in South American countries, Mexico, Brazil, perhaps Argentina, maybe Venezuela, I don't know, somewhere down there. So that British secret intelligence was able to feed information into Berlin to the effect that America was about to declare war on Germany. And at the time, Roosevelt didn't have enough votes, I think in the Senate, in order to get a declaration of war passed against Germany, because no Germans dropped any bombs by surprise on a Sunday morning in Pearl Harbour in Hawaii. However, Hitler didn't like people doing things to him. He liked to do things to other people. So he tried to gazump Roosevelt and he declared war on the US, which was very convenient from an Allied point of view, because Churchill and Roosevelt had agreed years earlier on a Germany first policy. So I think it was another 2 or 3 days before Benito Mussolini, also a signatory to the Axis Powers Treaty, he declared war on America. So America was suddenly at war against 3 different, more or less fascist regimes. And that war went on for a year or two against Italy. Italy changed sides after being militarily defeated pretty soon. Against the Germans, it went on until May 1945. Against the Japanese, it went on until August 1945. During that whole time, something like 54 million people were killed around the world. 20 million of them in Russia, 15 million of them in China. I think only 13 million of the dead Russians were soldiers. About 8 million Germans were killed. 2 million of them soldiers, and the rest of them were civilians, killed in the fighting and the bombing and stuff. America had 2,000 civilians killed 79 years ago today on Pearl Harbour Day. And they had, according to my reference history textbook, 292,000 military killed in action during the whole of the Second World War. 292,000. Now maybe that was 290,000 military KIAs and 2,000 civilians, or maybe it was 292,000 military KIAs plus 2,000 civilians. Don't know, contradictory figures in the book. But the point is, the USA has just suffered something along the lines of 270 to 280,000 coronavirus 2019 deaths. they're within 12 or 25,000 of equaling the number of US war dead from the whole of the Second World War, having that many of their citizens carried off and composted by a commensal virus from a Chinese horseshoe bat. I'm clearly not an American. First time I heard of Pearl Harbour, I think I was probably about 3 or 4. My grandmother was telling me about it. She managed to mix in the story of the midget submarines that attacked Sydney Harbour, the Japanese submarine, same one that launched the mini subs, but that one carried out artillery bombardment of the eastern suburbs of Sydney and also of the Newcastle city area, metropolitan area. And I was probably 6 or 7 years old before I realised that Pearl Harbour was not actually in Australia. But I was raised on the whole America saved the free world story. It came as a bit of a shock to me to discover that they had 13,000 killed in action in the First World War. They had 292,000 killed in action in the Second World War. They call themselves the leaders of the free world, the democratic leaders of the free world. They've just held an election after a year of a viral pandemic sweeping the globe, and their president has resisted telling the population to actually adhere to the medical advice. He said, don't socially distance, don't quarantine yourself, don't resist the urge to travel, don't resist the urge to gather, don't wear a mask. He suggested they inject themselves with bleach or maybe try and administer ultraviolet light internally to their lungs. We're dealing with a virus that has perhaps a 40% asymptomatic infection rate. So you get 10 people who are positive for coronavirus and only 6 of them know they're sick. We have an incubation period which is agreed to be about 14 days because some people start testing positive at 3 days, a bunch by 5, most people by 7 to 10. Nearly all of the people who are going to test positive will test positive by 14, but some go 28, 30 days without testing positive, and then they suddenly test positive. So you've really got to go 28 days locked down since you had your last new case before you can be certain that the virus has died out within the community because it couldn't get from one person to another. We kind of know that, like in Melbourne, they had no cases per day for a week, and then they had a couple of cases, and then they had a few cases, and then they had 4 or 5 cases, and then when it got to 20 cases, they tried doing little isolated ring fencey lockdowns, and that didn't work. And when they got to 100 cases a day, they actually locked down. And a month after that, they had 870 cases a day and they stayed locked down. And when they had 111 days of being locked down, they had no cases. And they've now gone 37 days with no cases. So the scientific advice is known to actually work. Does that mean the Americans are doing it? Not on your life, Nelly. I think 60% of the people who voted in the recent election voted in person on the day. 70% of those in-person on the day votes were for Trumpy. The Trumpletonians don't mask, they don't socially distance, they don't shut up, they yell at each other, cheering each other on, yelling about the Democrats and how socialist and communist they all are, or how black. So a week or 10 days after the election, middle of November, there was a spike in the daily case rate. And it takes you 3 weeks to die if you're going to die after you present to the hospital and, I'm sick, give me a test. Oxygen levels going. It takes 3 weeks to die. Okay, so by the end of November, we're into the spike of deaths caused by the election day. and all the rallies and all the rest of the shit. Here we are, what are we, 7 days, 10 days after the Thanksgiving holiday, where all the medicos said don't travel, don't gather together, have a virtual Thanksgiving, stay at home, don't spread the virus. No, we're now going into a daily case rate spike. I think 280,000 new cases the other day. Or was it 250,000? 250,000 new cases. For a brief moment in time, the daily case rate equaled the total death rate. You know, they'd had 250,000 dead and 250,000 cases that day. So we're entering the death spike from the Thanksgiving 10 days ago. Give that another week and the people who started to show up and present as new cases, they're going to start to die. And Trumpy started holding overturn the election result rallies, pretending that he didn't lose by 8 million votes or 5.1% of the ballot, because he can't believe that if 74 million people voted for him, then another 80 million people voted for Biden. It doesn't compute in his head. He can't believe that people didn't vote for him because he wanted to be voted for. He's never been thwarted in his life. His childhood must have been thoroughly fucking miserable. Nobody ever explained to him that there are limits to what you can get away with and money can't buy your way out of them. He's possibly going to try and actually generate a civil war over the election. He's got 47.4% of the population who are welded onto his entourage. They believe whatever he says. However, Rudy Giuliani has just caught the China virus, as Donnie calls it. So we'll see where that goes. I am one of the people who doesn't necessarily believe that Trumpy ever had COVID. I think he might have got himself tested in a fright because somebody in his entourage had been tested positive, got a negative result on a quick test, gone for the 12-hour test, got another negative result, and then decided to milk it for all the publicity it was worth. Pretend to have had COVID. Recover miraculously after a couple of days of not being very sick. Tell everybody it's not a problem. Don't worry about it. Don't listen to the science. Don't listen to the doctors. Oh, that's all the Democrat hoax. Well, if you work on the theory that Trumpy's magatard election denial rallies are going to cause another spike, and then work on the theory that the Republicans who are not actually dead or dying are then going to travel and gather for Christmas because, you know, civil liberties, you can't stop me from practicing my religion, and all those other beside the point issues. You know, whether you want to be a Christian and celebrate Christmas or whether you want to live on planet Earth and celebrate the summer or the winter solstice, you're still going to do it on December the 23rd to the 25th. You know, that's reality. You don't have to gather in a room with a roof over your head so you can't see what's going on in the sky. You don't have to do all that in order to celebrate the solstice festival. You could go outside and look at a bloody sundial. That'd work, wouldn't it? You know? Yes, it would. So you can figure that with the dates, a week after Christmas, there'll be another spike in the daily death rate because of Christmas. And then 3 weeks after that, which brings us to about the 20th of January, that's when there should be a really hootenanny peak in the death rate, just as Joe Biden's getting inaugurated. And because probably more Trumpletonians don't pay attention to science than Democrats, you might get 70% of the people who are going to die are going to be Trump voters. For damn, as near as damn is to swearing certain, 99.75% of the people who are going to die were or would have been or are already sick. Ill, diseased, debilitated, unwell, chronically crook. 90% will be 60 or over. The average age of people going into hospital and needing to go into hospital, because once you get bed block, that's when your case fatality rate goes from about 1 to 3% up to 12 to 15%. That's what happened in Italy and Spain and Portugal in the first wave. They got total bed block, and people who needed hospital treatment who could have survived had to go home and die alone at home. America's getting pretty close to that. Pretty close to that. In their first couple of waves, only one state at a time was getting it, so there were people in the next state who could cross the borders and go in, and they had surge staffing potential. You could bring personnel from one state to another to run your ICUs, expand them. They can't do that because they're all flat out at the moment, like lizards drinking. So yeah, they're just going to keep having these super spreader events until Biden gets into the White House and basically sets an example which the American people can follow towards not making shit worse. That's always assuming that Trumpy is unsuccessful in getting his Michigan militias to rise up and try and overthrow the deep state because QAnon said so. But anyway, here we are on Pearl Harbor Day, and allowing for the delay in the reporting and the processing time and all the rest of it, it is entirely possible that Trumpy has already caused more American citizens to die with his negligent malfeasance and maladministration of the global viral pandemic than Hitler and Tojo and Mussolini killed in the World War II combined. Just get your head around that. Trumpy's killing more Americans than World War II killed. Admittedly, America had just about the lowest casualty rate of any of the major participants. It did have the lowest of any of the major participants. But yeah, Trumpy's killing more Americans than Hitler and Tojo and Mussolini combined. And he's got his 47.4% of the population so fucked in the head, twisted, rooted in counterfactual history that he's got them taught to hate anti-fascism. He's got their head turned around so that they don't remember that World War II came about because the Grand Alliance of the Great British Empire, the French Empire, the Dutch Empire, the Belgian Empire, the United Soviet Socialist Republics, and the United States of America, they all banded together specifically to kill fascists. To kill fascists and shoot their fucking leadership until all the fascists were dead, and then the world could get on with living peacefully. And Donald Trump thinks that in America he can get away with staying president when he lost the election by telling people that if you're anti-fascist, you're a bad person. If you're anti-fascist, you must be a communist because Stalin fought against Hitler. Trump is literally identifying himself with the fascists who he is in the process of out-killing. He's killing more Americans than Hitler and Tojo and Mussolini combined. So talk about the infinitely fractal karmic feedback loops within the cosmic scoreboard effect. The nation that invented the practice of patrolling cities at night time with helicopters so that if any disturbance occurred on the ground, the helicopter could fly over and put a spotlight on it, that was America, and they did it in Vietnam. And when I read the article on it 20 years ago, the point was made that in Vietnam there were 4, sometimes 5 cities which had helicopter patrols all night over the city just in case something needed to be suppressed. Whereas in the 1990s, when I read the article, Air and Space Smithsonian, not a monthly, it was came out quarterly, I think. There were 45 American cities which had all-night helicopter patrols, so that if something happened on the ground, they could make whop, whop, whop noises and shine a searchlight onto the footpaths of chasing their own citizens. All of the shit and the misery and the corruption and the incompetence that America has exported around the world, it seems to all come back, you know, like sow the wind, reap the whirlwind, you know, the chickens are flying home to roost. And they've grown up to be the size of fucking emus, and they're going to kick your whole foul house down. Both spellings are foul. Foul, FOWL. And yeah, 4 years ago they voted for it. They got it. Now they've voted against it. And the fucking losers are too stupid to accept the fact that they're lost, so they're going to pretend that because there's lots of them, then they must have won. And I seriously believe that the reason Donald Trump hates the idea of a democratic process or a democratic government is because he sees the Democrats as being his opponents. That's why he gravitates towards dictatorial, authoritarian, tyrannical fascism. Because dictators and tyrants and authoritarians, they're all anti-democrat, and he wants to beat the Democrats. He vaguely sort of almost understands a dictionary, but he doesn't understand the history book. So, to all of my American viewers and subscribers, when trouble starts, be somewhere else entirely. When trouble starts, be somewhere else entirely. You're not going to convince 320 million fucking idiots to come to their senses and stop acting like dickheads. It's what they've spent generations being bred and trained and raised up to want to do. Just get out of their fucking way and wait till they compost each other, and in the end you can come out of your hidey hole and grow your food in their rotting remains, because, as a smarter man than me once upon a time said, thus the meek shall inherit the earth. Yeah, I went to a Catholic boarding school, even though I was a lapsed Presbyterian. Anyway, that's my take on it. Pearling of the Harbour Day. As Trumpy's kill rate punches up through the death toll of Americans killed in World War II. The world had come through conflict that had taken, it was said, 54 million lives. Nearly 4 times the population of Australia today. 15 million men had died on the battlefields, 39 million people in the towns and cities. 6 million of them had been Jews murdered by the Nazis. Russia had suffered most in the German onslaught, and afterward 20 million dead. 7 million of them civilians. China had lost 5 million soldiers and various estimates of civilians up to 10 million. Nearly 4 million German soldiers had died and 2,300,000 German people at home. 170,000 German Jews were murdered. Japan had suffered 1,140,000 men killed in action and 668,000 people in raids on its home islands, while another 240,000 Japanese were missing. The toll went on in that manner, nation by nation, scaling down with their size or fortunes or their situations. Australia lost 30,000 military personnel and 26,000 into captivity. Britain paid with 271,000 military lives and those of 61,000 civilians. The United States with 292,000 servicemen. The war had cost the world $1,600 billion. $29,629.62 worth of financial, commercial activity generated by each one of the 54 million lives lost. Because I'm into numbers, I did a few abstracts. USSR, from a population of 220 million, they lost 20 million killed. That's 1 dead for every 11 people. China, 300 million, lost 15 million, 1 in every 20. European Jews, maybe 10 million, and they lost 6 million killed. 1 for every 1.6. 1 for every 1.6. It's like every time there was 1.5 Jews in Europe, 1 of them got killed. Germans, 56 million, 6.3 million killed. 1 for every 8.6 citizens. Japan, 65 million, 2.048 million killed. 1 Japanese killed for every 31.7 citizens. Britain, 36,332,000 killed, 1 dead for every 108.4 citizens. Australia, 6.5 million, 30,000 dead, 1 for every 216.6 citizens. USA, 150 million citizens, 292,000 killed in action, 1 dead for every 513.69 Americans. The first thing that sticks out is that there are now 320 million Americans, not 150 million. So one can confidently predict that the next weaselly excuse that the Trumpletonians are going to come out with is to say that because the American population is twice now what it used to be, more than twice now what it used to be, then Trumpy killing as many American citizens with his malfeasance, negligence and maladministration as all the fascists did in the whole of World War II isn't a fair comparison, because there's more than twice as many Americans. So he's really only killed half as many on a per capita basis. And I would counter that by saying that wait till Christmas or New Year. If he's punched through 292,000 about now or this week, give that another month and he'll be up past 500,000, no drama at all. And by the time Joe Biden's inaugurated, that could be 1 million. That could be 1 million. If he can convince enough people to pay no attention to the medical advice and just keep on travelling and keep on gathering, continue to get around without a mask because wearing a mask is a sign of weakness or whatever it is he's got them to believe. Yeah, Trumpy can kill 1 million Yankees. He can kill 1 million Trumpletardians by the middle of January. No drama. All they've got to do is keep following where he leads. Happy Pearl Harbor Day. Seriously, happy Pearl Harbor Day. What you see is what you get. Ciao.